Hello everyone, I'm back here with another book review. And today we read To Build a Fire by Jack London. This is a short story that came out in 1908, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that further into the review. But as the story says, as the title says, the story is about a man trying to build a fire. And this book is only 23 pages. Like I said, it's a short story, but for how short this book is, there was a lot that I was able to take out of it, so I'm going to share that with you guys right now. Sorry, I have my notes here, and I'm going to be looking at them throughout here. Now, first off, I think that this story has a whole feeling of irony. And when I say irony, I mean kind of like the kind of irony where the reader or the audience knows more of what's going to happen than the character themselves. All throughout like when I say beginning, middle, and end, this book is short, so it's all kind of together. But at the beginning of the story, it kind of talks about how how the man shouldn't be hiking in such cold temperatures during this time of year, and going hiking alone in the Yukon and stuff like that, and kind of alluding to how people don't really come out of the kind of situation that guy put himself into. Now, jumping all the way to the end, we're gonna be talking. So at the very end, spoiler alert, the protagonist doesn't have a name. Nobody really has a name in the story, but he dies. He freezes to death, and but the thing is, at the very end of his death, he feels peace. He feels calm, and he even says that he felt that freezing wasn't that bad of a way to die. And I think that maybe this character found contentment. Well, the thing is, he didn't just start freezing to death and he was satisfied with it. I'm gonna talk about that in a little bit, but I think that he could have felt content in his death because he put himself in a difficult situation and he tried his hardest. I think maybe, so the whole point of the story is that he's going hiking through the Yukon because he has his friends. He's going to see his friends that are in a cabin. And yes, that's what he's probably there trying to do. I think that maybe there could have been another reason for him wanting to do that. Maybe he wanted to give himself a challenge. Sorry, there is bugs all over me. Maybe he wanted to give himself a challenge in his life. He wanted to live a little, and we humans love putting themselves into like risky situations like that. I think especially men too. I think we kind of get to points where we want to break up kind of the monotony of things. We want to maybe chase a little adrenaline, stuff like that. And I think that maybe this character could have just been another man seeking that thrill. And I think that kind of referring back to like the irony of the story, I think that fate could be a big theme of this story. Leads into the idea of how nature tends to always win. Although you look around, you can kind of see examples of like nature being destroyed by humanity and man. I think that always at some point nature not fights back, but nature always prevails somehow, and I think that the story shows how nature always has an upper hand on humanity, and there's no exceptions, in the cold or anything like that. Survival of the fittest, and the bugs are all over me. One of the things that the story also kind of always mentions is how the guy hiked alone. He did have a dog with him, and I'm going to talk about the dog here in a little bit, but humans are not meant to be alone at the end of the day, not alone for very long periods of time. And being alone can do things to people, and you know how people can act different when they're alone compared to other when they're surrounded by people. Humans need you know, that interaction, that community, that companionship with other people, and that you can't just find in the dog. The guy had a dog with him, but he couldn't talk to the dog. The dog didn't know what was going on necessarily. And the dog, talking about the dog stayed with the man the entire time, even though the man at one point tried to kill him, which I'll talk about again in a little bit. But even after the man died, the dog stayed behind, hoping that the man was actually just sleeping for a long time. And eventually the dog, you know, realized that he died. But it kind of leads into the nature thing, how you know, the dog survived the story. And going into the death of the protagonist, I think you could kind of see the 5 stages of grief throughout. And I don't know if the author had this in mind when writing, but you know, he showed anger when he was frustrated. He could start the fire, and something kind of set in where he had kind of this fear that he knew that something might be happening to him. And then he also had the denial, whereas he kind of started to realize that things were getting bad, he was sacrificing, he was trying to start a fire in his hands, and he was burning his own flesh just in an attempt to start some sort of fire. And that could also kind of lead into bargaining, but I think the biggest example of bargaining is where he tried to kill his dog. The story says that he wanted to kill his dog so that he could put his hands inside the dog's dead body for warmth. And then depression, he thinks about once he kind of realizes that he probably isn't going to make it out. He starts thinking about how his friends are probably going to find his body within the next couple days, and what they might feel and say. And then of course acceptance, where I kind of talked at the beginning how he was content, how he kind of eventually accepted his demise. Also, I'm going to kind of go back into the story, the fate part and the irony part, where the story kind of seemed like that this man didn't really have a choice, that no matter what, he was fated to die this way. Everything he tried, there's always seemed to be some sort of, not coincidence, but some sort of way that his plans just didn't work out. Like dropping the matches and snow falling on his fire, stuff like that. And it seemed like he didn't really have a choice, and that he kind of just had to live out the path that was already predetermined for him. And stemming off that, you could go into a whole idea about fate and predestination or whatever, but that's not what we're going to talk about. And wrapping up, like I said at the very beginning, the story was written in 1908, and I think it's a very cool story for how old it is, and how I don't know if relevant is the right word, but how this story is still stuck around over 100 years later, and how we can still talk about it and probably find new things. And like I said, for how short it is, I found a lot to talk about and a lot of things that really stuck out to me. But my overall thoughts, of course, you can't really I can't give too much praise to a short story compared to other books, but it's certainly one I could see myself going back to, because this only took me 20 minutes to read. So I definitely would go back to it at some point, and it's a good story. It's not like I'd recommend it to anybody. Maybe if you're new to reading books or something like that, this is a good place to start. And besides that, that's all I have for right now. And I'll see you guys next time.